Marco Codes! Hello folks, Marco here. Today we're going to talk about htmx, and I'm not going to give you another 20-minute opinion rambling piece of how great it is and how it's going to replace React or whatever. Instead, I want to let the code speak for itself, and I want you to form your own opinion. Hence, we're going to have a look at a real-world example, not just, going through the tutorial on the htmx webpage. And for that, who would have thought we're going to use my Google Photos clone, an endless pit of challenges. Now, I want to display 100,000 pictures. Problem being, at the moment, I only display the top 20 pictures I have in my database, right? And when I scroll down here, it simply stops. I know there are more pictures in the database. I would like to have some infinite scrolling, meaning as soon as I end up down here, Wednesday, 1st of August 2018, I want there to be a request to the backend fetching the next 20 images, yeah? Inserting them here, and then when I scroll down again, fetch the next batch of 20 images. Simply put, infinite scrolling. That is job number one we're trying to solve with htmx. Job number two, you see that teeny tiny download image archive button. It poses a couple of problems, and I've had a look at other, online Google Photo clone libraries, open source libraries, and most of them kind of get it wrong. Because what you could do is, imagine I'm downloading now all the pictures here I see on the screen, or you can select them or whatever. When I have 20, 30, 40 of these images, they're all maybe 10 megabytes large. Your zip file will be 400, 500 megabytes large. And it's going to take some time to actually create that zip file if you do a synchronous request. So you click the button, and then you zip the file, and then it's going to take a minute or 2 minutes. Your request will time out, and it's not going to work. Instead, what you ideally would like to have is, let's click the Download Image Archive button. Then the button just hides. We see a nice little progress bar being updated with the real zip progress on the back end. And once the progress bar reaches 100%, we want to see a tiny download link to get our archive. So there's a couple of different states this panel here at the top can go through, and it all should be done asynchronously without us having to write any JavaScript whatsoever. Crazy, right? Now, what you can do is you can go to htmx.org, read the docs, the reference, whatsoever. I'm just going to, in 50 seconds or whatever, I'm going to explain you the big ideas behind htmx. Because we're actually going back to the early year 2000, and we're going to call the server with AJAX requests, right? But instead of getting JSON back or XML back, and then having a JavaScript frontend, like React, Angular, turning that JSON into, well, in the end, HTML, we're just going to ask the server, hey, could you give us back some snippets of HTML? And we're going to insert them somewhere in our page, right? That's the way we did it like 20 years ago. And now that way seems to be on the rise again. So let's see how we can, implement infinite scrolling and the asynchronous download button armed with that knowledge. Back in our Google Photos clone project, and I'm using Java, Spring Boot, and ThymeLeaf, but it doesn't really matter. Everything I'm going to show you is applicable for any programming language ecosystem, right? You need to have one file, just an htmx.org version 1.9.5 in this case, but it doesn't really matter the specific version. Simply add it to your project. I put it straight into my index.html file. That is literally all you need. Now let's have a look at the actual template, and I'm just going to put the HTML page side by side. What we want to do is we're looping through a map called dates to media, because remember, we have specific dates like Saturday 4th of March, Saturday 29th of October. And for every date, we have essentially a list of images, a potential list of images. And so we need to have two loops, looping through the dates first, and then for every date, looping through the list of images. That's what you can see here. In ThymeLeaf speak, we're doing a ThymeLeaf each, right? Through all the dates. We're printing out a header for every specific date, which is just the date nicely formatted, plus the location where the picture was taken, and then the list of images. The images are just wrapped by a link, so I can click them later on. You can see the naming is perfect because every image has a source of /a. That /a endpoint returns me the preview thumbnails, and the /b endpoint returns me the full quality image, so to speak. Can't get any better than that, but we'll fix that maybe we'll fix that in a later episode. Now, how do we add htmx in the picture? Because remember, I told you we're not going to write any JavaScript. That's right, because htmx makes you write custom HTML attributes, and you have to learn about them and read up about them on the documentation, but I'm just going to show you the most important ones to get our use case implemented here. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to say that, hey, please, my link should at some point issue GET requests to a specific server endpoint I already built, I already prepared, which always gives me back 20 new images, starting from a specific day. And I write that by using ajax-get. Hey, please call the seek endpoint from a specific day, and then also with a specific ID, starting from a specific ID, because I maybe want to get 20 new pictures after Wednesday, August 8th, right? But 20 new pictures taken after or before, in this case, before this one, or before this one, before this one. That's why I'm also passing in an ID here in addition to the date. So that's it. Now, when specifically should we do that GET request? Well, htmx has the concept of triggers. And there's a couple of triggers. For example, you could trigger by a specific, in a specific time frame, by milliseconds, or if some content changes somewhere, or if an element pops up in your viewport, meaning when you scroll down and the first time we see the very last picture here, then we want to trigger that GET request, which says, hey, fetch the next 20 pictures. There's something else, because by default, what happens is we execute the request, we get HTML back to the front end. And then by default, we, or htmx rather, would insert the HTML we get back, or the contents of the body, inside the element which triggered the request. So we would still keep the link here, the last link, and replace the image with 20 new images, which isn't what we want. Instead, we want to say ajax swap, please put the HTML we receive after the element. So essentially here, right? And not inside here. And these three attributes are actually enough to get our infinite scrolling working. The only thing we need to do now is to clean up, put the proper date here, put the proper ID here, and also make sure not just to put these attributes on every link, on every image, but just on the very last one. And I'll just quickly do that and run you through the code. Right, so I clean things up a tiny bit, meaning I have a new variable called isLast, which tells me, am I really at the end of both loops? So did I go through every date and now through every image, and then really just on the very last image, I want to add these attributes. And then I'm not a Thymeleaf super expert, so it could be that I did it slightly wrong. But what I'm doing is, Thymeleaf, please append an attribute, do a conditional append. If it's the last element, if it's the last image, then add an ajax trigger with value revealed, otherwise don't add it. Add an ajax swap with after end, right, if it's the last element. Do an ajax get, if it's the last element, again, to our seek endpoint with the correct date format and with the correct ID. Maybe there's a different way of, how to not having this last check in here 3 times, but I'll tell you what, we'll just give it a try. We'll now reload the page, open up our browser again with DevTools enabled. And now what I'm doing is I'll just scroll down. It's going to take me a while now with the zoom level. And once we reach the bottom, yay, did you just see that? What actually happened is my browser tried to call the seek endpoint, getting the next batch of 20 images. It just gets a 500 error because we haven't fully implemented that endpoint yet. We have yet to write the corresponding HTML template for that. But that is pretty cool. So in fact, adding these 3 attributes already worked. We just now need to figure out what the seek endpoint is supposed to return. For that, I will create a new page, a new HTML file. I'm going to call it seek. And I'm going to show you a pattern which you'll often use with htmx. Because think about it. When you look at what should that seek endpoint return, the seek endpoint should essentially return the same HTML fragment that I currently have on the index.html page. So I could just, copy and paste the stuff inside here. And now I have duplicated code, which is not too great. So what I actually can do in Thymeleaf speak, replace the code block and, simply import whatever the seek HTML file here offers me with that syntax here, right? So I'm just replacing that block here with whatever I have inside the fragment. Should we give that a try? All right, here we go again. I'm scrolling down a tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit. Come on, where's my 20 pages? Yes, and as you can see, suddenly you can see that the request worked. I already, sent off 2 requests here for more and more pictures. Maybe there's a third. Yes, that is pretty cool. So actually what we implemented worked, or is there maybe a tiny bug left? There is in fact a tiny bug left, because what you can see now is, looking at Monday, the 30th of July, 2018, you see here, this picture, the last one was the breakpoint where we fetch another 20 images. The next 20 images come down here, but unfortunately they show the date header again. And we don't want to do that. So the header here needs to be conditional. And I just want to show all these pictures independent of the scrolling breakpoint together. We quickly need to fix that. All right, meaning I'll go back to my header and I'll just write an if clause, only show the header if the images I'm getting, right, if the 20 images I'm fetching have a different date than what I'm currently displaying. Let's see if this works. Let's open up a browser again. I'll scroll down a tiny bit. And then when the 30th of July comes around, you can see there's no additional breakpoint here anymore, no additional header. I just get all the images combined for a specific day. And that is pretty damn cool, because what that means is we implemented infinite scrolling by just adding 3 attributes. It might look a bit convoluted now with the specific time leaf syntax, but we didn't have to write a line of JavaScript, and it simply works. It's easy to reason about. We have just an additional template, the seek HTML template, which returns us back these snippets, which we also include in the index.html file. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and then we'll continue with the download button straight away. Hello, download button. What I just did is I created another fragment, right, called archive UI. And what we're going to do is same thing here as with the seeking method. We're just going to take our button and put it into the fragment. And then in here, in our index.html page, we simply reference, right? I love the auto completion, right? So I don't have to worry about if everything is correct. Now, let me see what our archive UI fragment actually is supposed to be doing. Thinking about it, when you click the button, there's a couple of, let's say, states, or even before you click the button. So you either have no zip process running in the background. Let's call it waiting status. You wait for the user to click the button. Once the user clicks the button, the zipping is running on the server. So, the archiving is in progress. And then once the archiving is done, that's the third state, you want to, show the download link and let the user download or cancel the download. I already created a couple of Java classes on the backend, which do the zipping, which allow you to get the current zip progress, and we're just going to make use of them. And if you're interested in how they're implemented, please have a look at the link GitHub source code. What we have at the end of the day, inside our time leaf template, we have an object which you can ask, hey, what is the current status? And I made it real simple at the moment, making the status a string doesn't really matter. I'm just going to ask, hey, if my archiver status equals waiting, then what I want to do, I want to show the download button. That's all there is to it. Then I want to do some good old copy and pasting. If the process is running, so if the zipping is asynchronously happening on the server at the moment, then I want to show a progress bar. The progress bar is also relatively simple. It's just a div, literally, with an inside div with a specific color. And depending on the width of the inside width, that's the progress bar, really. And then we have a third status. If archiver status is complete, then we want to show a download link, right, to a specific URL, which lets me download the archive, or a button which actually clears the download and lets me, recreate a new zip archive. But these are the 3 states that my panel can go through. And now we'll just need to spice up, these contents with a couple of htmx attributes. Let's start at the top. So we show our button. that is all nice and dandy, but we have no form. We're not submitting it somewhere. We're not doing anything, but we want to. Well, in fact, what we want to do is we want to call hxPost, make a post request to the archive endpoint. And maybe I should have mentioned that before. I created a couple of endpoints. So if you call post archive, right, then you start the zipping. If you do a get media archive, you get a status back essentially. And if you do delete media archive, then you just, clear the current zip file. But that's all we need to do. So once we click the button, we will post to media archive, right? Internally, it will actually, trigger the zipping, as I've said multiple times now. So the archiver status will be running, and we'll get a new HTML snippet back showing, the progress bar down here. Again, you'll have to think about where exactly will that new HTML snippet end up. As mentioned before, it will be part of the inner HTML of the element which triggered the request. So in fact, we would actually take this content down here and put it inside our button, which is not what we want. Instead, we want to replace the whole thing, meaning I'll just wrap, our if-else's with another div with two more attributes. hxTarget, this means, hey, it doesn't matter if you click this button down here, if something happens down here, or if you click a button here or a link here, always do something, replace the entire div. Right? Again, we have the hxSwap attribute where we say, don't replace the inner HTML of my div, just replace the outer HTML, meaning replace, the entire div with whatever you get back from the server. Which again will be the same div with the same idea, just with different content. Did that make sense? Well, I hope so. Now, imagine, I'm not going to show you this in the browser now, but imagine this kind of works, or it's supposed to work, and we see our progress bar. So we just click the button and then we get the progress bar snippet back. The problem is we just see the progress bar and then that's it. I mean, it doesn't update itself. And there's a couple of ways what you could do is we could, enable htmx's WebSocket support and whatnot. Let's start with a simple solution. Let's add some polling. For that, I'm just going to add another div here, right? Let me just add that here and I'll tell you what it does. Again, we just say, hey, please call the media archive endpoint with a get request and trigger that request after 500 milliseconds after you, received or loaded that HTML snippet. So in fact, we load our progress bar and then the progress bar or the HTML waits for 500 milliseconds, calls, the endpoint again and gets a new HTML snippet back. And that way, every 500 milliseconds, we update our progress bar with the current progress. That's all there is to it. Now, last but not least, if the status is complete, yes, we want to be able to click the download link. That should work, but the button should do something else. The button should issue a HTTP delete request to our media archive endpoint, and that should just clear the download. And then once the download is cleared, the status here is being reset and we should see our download image archive snippet again. Wow, that was a lot of state management in our head. I'll just try and see now if this is actually working. Let's go to a browser. Let's reload. I'm going to click download image archive. Yay, look at how cool is that. It looks a bit funky, but that is the real zipping progress on the back end. You can see we just went through the 3 different states, seeing the initial download button, seeing the progress bar, now seeing the download link. Let me just click the download link. You can see I've tried that a couple of times before. I'm just going to open the file directly and you can see, yay, I have a zip file with the images I see here on the screen. And when I open it up, this one, for example, I see the picture in full quality, right? So the zipping actually worked. It was asynchronous. It didn't time out. We got a status update. We can clear the download and re-zip again. And we didn't have to write a single line of JavaScript for this. All right, that was just a sneak peek into what htmx can do for you. What I would recommend you do is go to its homepage, read through the reference documentation just a tiny bit, find out what are the core attributes you can use. You saw get, you saw post already. you saw target, you saw swap. There's a couple of other ones you might want to play with. They also have a great example section where you can see a couple of UI patterns implemented with htmx. We essentially did infinite scrolling and we did the downloading stuff. I don't remember if it's here or if I found that somewhere else. But other than that, you saw what htmx can do for you. Now let me know in the comments down below, what do you think about it? Would you still rather go with something like Rec, for example, for these specific use cases? What's your opinion? That's it. See you next time. Sayonara.